All right, so today we actually have two different Nintendo Switch Online related updates to talk about, one of which having to do with the obvious games that dropped into the service. And yes, we will be checking those out briefly towards the second half of this video, because one of them, the new FZero games, FZero has been getting a lot of love other than GX is still missing. Every other game is now playable on Nintendo Switch, but it's brand new to the West for the first time. Like, it was only released in Japan before. We now have a new playable F-Zero from the GBA era that was never released anywhere outside of Japan before, so that's exciting. And then bigger than that, if you're more interested in this Nintendo Switch Online Playtest Program, there's a lot of new information being discovered and discussed online here recently, such as Nintendo asking people not to discuss what's part of this playtest, also just the mayhem that came out around it, where a lot of people were trying to get into it. 10,000 was not enough spots, not even close, for a fraction of the people that wanted to be a part of this thing. And we now have official confirmation of just how big the file size for the application that you have to download to be a part of this playtest is, and that's throwing off some of the leading theories like this might be some kind of online streaming service that Nintendo is testing out, a game streaming service specifically. So there are some updated theories around what this might be, but again, nothing 100% concrete. But we'll get on the same page with all of that. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick it off by hopping over to Nintendo Everything, where they do have a written up article with some of the extra details that have been discovered around this Nintendo Switch Online Playtest Program that have been uncovered. So you can first see Nintendo requests Switch Online Playtest Program users not to share content from the event. In an official notice tied to the Switch Online Playtest Program, Nintendo is requesting that users do not share content from the event. The trial was announced yesterday with signups happening earlier today. However, fans were quick to discover a notice that states, "We request you do not discuss or disclose content from either the Nintendo Switch Online Playtest Program, test software, or website with others." Many are curious as to what the Nintendo Switch Online Playtest Program is about, as it's not something we've seen from the Big N before, but if you weren't one of the lucky people selected, you may need to wait longer for information. Having said that, with 10,000 users selected for the trial, one would think the details will find their way to the internet one way or another. Note that while some have been throwing the term NDA around, it does not seem to be legally binding. It's unclear if something could happen to your Nintendo account if you do not follow the guidelines, however. If you do share information, you're doing so at your own risk. We'll also mention that the same notice asks to not share their download code with others. Codes cannot be reissued or reused. The Nintendo Switch Online Playtest Program begins on October 23rd, but information will be shared a few days prior with those that were selected. All that's confirmed currently is that users will need to download software that requires 2.2 gigabytes of free space. Okay, so couple interesting takeaways. I don't know where in Nintendo's mind they think, if they're not putting out legally binding NDAs, how they're going to keep 10,000 people from sharing images, screenshots, footage of what goes on with this playtest program, and also just a detailed description of everything that these players have learned. Like, it's obviously going to be something that gets out onto the internet very quickly, but I don't think you're going to have to worry about that. I was fortunate enough to get into the program, refreshed right at the time that it went live. Maybe I was a second early and got in that way. I don't know. It seemed to almost be luck of the draw. So very grateful for that. I wish Nintendo let in more users, and it seemed like a frustrating process for everybody else that just tried and was there right on time and still didn't get in. So I was very happy with that result, but unfortunately, a lot of people are going to be left out of this, but the information is going to get out there online. You're not going to have to worry about that. You're going to absolutely find out what this thing is as soon as the 20th, if that information is shared then, because all we know for sure for now is that Nintendo will be issuing some additional information on the 20th ahead of the program going live on the 23rd, and we know it lasts until November 5th. Now, the 2.2 gigabytes of free space is an interesting one, because a lot of people were running with the idea that maybe this was some kind of online streaming service. It might even be something like streaming GameCube games to the console, but you wouldn't assume that if you're streaming the game content that you would need a file size that substantial. Just the N64 app itself is like 1.6 gigs, in that range, and all the other NSO apps much smaller than that. Now, that's because they have the games all baked in with that one emulator file. So 2.2 gigs, to me, it seems too small to be GameCube if it is what this is. But the interesting thing, and while I do want it to be GameCube, especially if it's natively played GameCube games, and we did of course have those shipping manifests that came out that showed Nintendo was ordering some kind of component related to a GameCube controller and shipping it into manufacturing centers. Like, there is something going on with GameCube, and I think that's coming to the system eventually. It would just be very strange to see Nintendo not tie this announcement to any kind of Nintendo Direct and just do it as part of a playtest and not give you any heads up ahead of time, essentially, that GameCube's going to be coming to the service, and the only people to find out that it is are part of this playtest, unless if there is an official announcement, some kind of mini Direct or a Nintendo Switch 2 trailer drop between now and then, and that's how they're going to reveal it, and then we find out we're all a part of that playtest on the back end. But again, a very off way for Nintendo to communicate that a new system is coming. So I'm not quite sold on that, but I do think the file size of 2.2 gigs, in theory, if this is a playtest, maybe it only has a couple GameCube games tied to it and you're just testing out the online functions within those games. So that is a plausible file size for something like 2 or 3 GameCube games, and that's what we get to test out until November 5th. That is in the realm of possibility and not off the table, but I'm also trying not to set my expectations quite that high. This could be something like Nintendo now offering to expansion pack members the ability to not have to download an entire eShop game to check it out, but maybe like the free demos are streamed via gameplay like you see on Xbox Game Pass. If you're a member of that, like, you don't have to download an entire game to check it out. You do have the option to stream a lot of them through their xCloud servers, and then you can choose to download it natively if you want. Maybe that's what this new feature is. Maybe it is them testing stronger netcode, something different, and they're just advertising it as a feature, or maybe they have to figure out crossplay with Nintendo Switch 2, and that's what they're doing. So we're going to dive a little bit more into the speculation on what this playtest program could be, but at this point, I do want to briefly transition over to some new Game Boy Advance FZero content that was just added to Switch Online. All right, so the new round of FZero content updates are live for Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack, and we have FZero Climax, which is the one that was never released in any other region than Japan. At least it was never brought to the US, that's for sure. I don't know if it was released in like the European region. I don't think so. It's literally like you still see the Japanese box art, and then kind of like how we have these other games that have come over that are region specific until NSO, which is a cool thing that Nintendo could do. I wish they localized all the games that they could do that, so you could enjoy like translated text. It's obviously not that hard to do with AI nowadays, but I do want to actually hop into FZero Climax. To be honest, both FZero GP and Climax are completely new experiences for me, because as much as an FZero fan as I am, definitely primarily got exposed to the series in the N64 era with F-Zero X, and then GX on the GameCube, and then I went back and played the original F-Zero from the SNES, so I did not originally grow up with that. But we'll hop straight into some gameplay so you guys don't have to see me navigate the menu systems here and everything. Okay, so right into some of the gameplay for F-Zero Climax from GBA, and you know what? It's an additional F-Zero game, which is always a win. It's really cool to see Nintendo do what they did with F-Zero 99 as well. So I'm loving the love for F-Zero recently. The only thing we are sorely missing, and there's rumors around it for so long, is something like an F-Zero GX remake. So what are we doing with that, Nintendo? I definitely think that's like a no-brainer. If they're debating on bringing back the series for a fresh installment or not, and they need kind of a testing grounds on how it would do with the Nintendo Switch mainline release, just port and remaster, give the, you know, the treatment of a really like a Metroid Prime remaster is what I would want to see them do, where it is truly a visual upgrade. It's just brought into, you know, modern enhancements with widescreen HD and all of that, quality of life control improvements and stuff. And then from there, you know, you're good. Just see how it does with the audience, and then you can determine if it's time to make another F-Zero or not past that. So I love to see racing games from Nintendo. I think having only Mario Kart is kind of a mistake. I get that it's the juggernaut sales success for Nintendo, but you should have an alternative racing game from first-party Nintendo, in my opinion. And okay, so B is boost, not okay, we got into fourth at the end, so that's a shame. B is to boost, not to break. I couldn't read the controls screen breakdown that was on screen, so we'll figure out stuff together on this. But glad that this is over, F-Zero Climax being brand new. And then really interesting time for Nintendo Switch Online, because one thing that I did want to mention that I actually forgot to do in the earlier part of the video is just where we're at, like, renewal wise for the expansion pack, and how interesting it is that this particular playtest is happening right around that time, because you might remember the expansion pack became a thing on October 25th. That was the launch date, if I'm not mistaken. So the fact that right around then, we historically in the past would either see a roadmap of new N64 games to kind of get people to be like, hey, stay subscribed. Like we got the announcement that GoldenEye would be coming that 1 September Nintendo Direct to remind people like, hey, don't cancel your NSO subscription this annual plan. You'll want to keep it for GoldenEye and all these other great N64 games that are coming up. Well, we haven't gotten anything like that this year because we just had the partner direct in August and there was no NSO section in that direct. So it does seem to be timeline wise like time for Nintendo to announce something major for the service to justify people that are on the fence, maybe thinking about canceling their subscriptions, to renew them, right? So it is interesting to me that they're announcing this playtest first before announcing anything about what it's for or what's coming to the service, because I think we're about due for some kind of announcement for a big upgrade, you know, and even just finishing out the rest of the N64 roadmap. Like, I don't know why we have to talk about every time we get an update for expansion pack. Like, where the heck is Smash Bros 64 and Donkey Kong 64 and Diddy Kong Racing alone? Like, just those games would honestly elevate the service quality for me to a whole nother level. So F-Zero, I'm on novice difficulty, still absolutely having a rough time and not coming in first. So that's the reality of F-Zero. It's notorious for being a very difficult game, but cool additions nonetheless. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments down below if you have nostalgia or memories for any F-Zero Game Boy Advance games. I guess GP would be really the one that most people probably played, but maybe you played this other one through emulation or something like that as well. Or if you're in Japan, definitely let me know in the comments if you were familiar with this and grew up with it. But always cool to see an NSO upgrade nonetheless. Hopefully we get something for base tier before the month is over. And I'm really hoping that like the expansion pack tier and the base tier get once per month updates. I think that's a great cadence. That's what we saw Nintendo do really most of this year, and then it really just fell off in the middle point past that June Direct. So unfortunate that we're back to kind of just randomly guessing what tier of the service is going to be updated and when, but we're going to get more NSO news and hopefully big news soon. By the 20th, we should have additional information, and then the 23rd for sure, that playtest will be live and we'll essentially have a good picture of what this is actually going to be. So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.